Hey everybody, Quantum here, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the best decks you could be using for the upcoming Duel Triangle event for October 2024. There are 3 different teams you can join, and of course you can change it up during the duration of the event, but we're going to take a look at what is the best fusion decks, synchro decks, and link decks that you could be using for what's legal in this event. So let's go ahead and jump straight in. Alright, so as you can see on screen here, we have 11 different decks that you could be using for this event. We're going to cover each one a little bit in depth here. But before we get started, I just want to say the reason why you may want to play the Link, the Fusion, and the Synchro event separately is that you want to get the titles for each of these individual extra deck strategies to get the final title for getting all 3 of the individual titles. But of course, you can just stick to one extra deck strategies. Alright, so the first Fusion deck, which I have no idea how good it's actually going to be, but I do play this quite a bit on ladder, and that is Tearlaments. And my build actually is a 40 card build that uses King of the Swamp, and it actually is pretty good. In the Duelist Cup, I reached max level, and I went on an 85% win rate throughout the whole of the Duelist Cup. I was going to post a video on it, but I just didn't get the time to do it. But yeah, this King of the Swamp version was actually pretty good. And without being able to play your synchros and your links, you're basically stuck with fusions, right? So what you can actually do with Tearlaments now, and I've played this version as well to a certain extent, obviously, not exclusively limited to fusion, but you can put the Shadal cards in, and the Shadal cards might actually be half decent because you can floodgate your opponent with a Winda, right? So if you think about how I go up against Tenpai, they need a way to out the Winda, which they can probably do with Forbidden Droplet, but they won't be able to super poly it away because they can't play fusions. They really only have Droplet, and they can't destroy this with like Dark Hole, Raigeki, or whatever, right? Because it cannot be destroyed by opponent's card effect. So they basically have to have Droplet, I think, in order to out it. We'll take a look at the Tenpai list in a bit when we get to the Synchro portion. But when we take a look at what extenders, I guess you could say, that these other decks might have, like Prosperity is banned too, right? So this is a big card for Tenpai. This is basically like get whatever cards you want. So if you need a board breaker, if you need engine, so the banning of Pot of Prosperity in this event across all 3 extra deck strategies is actually pretty big for you. They can't Lightning Storm the Winda. Like there's nothing really that they can do to out the Winda except for trying to negate it somehow, right? So yeah, Imperm is a way that they would negate it, but they probably use Imperm. They don't save it for their turn. They probably use it when you're trying to establish your board. So if you can kind of play your hand out so that I'm going to go for the Winda, this is a card that I think can lock up the opponent. And the one downside of Tearlaments in this event is that you don't want to play bad mills, and hand traps are bad mills. So you don't normally play Ash Blossom in Tearlaments, right? You play Maxi, but I'm like, okay, if I take out Maxi, I could put in Ash, but I've opted to put in Ghost Ogre instead for 2 reasons. One, this is a light. Or you could play Valor. Snow is a light as well, and this helps synergize a little bit with the El Shadal construct that you could also make. So with the Shadal fusion, with the polymerization that you could get off of the King of the Swamp, and with this quick play fusion, the El Shadal fusion, you could make the El Shadal construct. And this card isn't anything super great, but at the start of the damage step, if this card battles a special summon monster, you can just destroy that monster, which could be kind of relevant if you're able to activate this effect. Actually, I don't know if this is an activated effect. Somebody let me know in the comment section below if you're made it this far, because this might be able to play around the Transcendent Dragion, because it might be a continuous effect that's just applied when it happens. So that is pretty interesting. But yeah, when this card is special summon, you just send a Shadal card to your graveyard, so you can get a free spell and trap pop. You can get a free extra send, send beast for a free draw. So this card is actually kind of decent. I was using it in the Shadal tier version as well, and it was doing quite well. And then if it's sent to the graveyard, target 1 Shadal spell or trap in your graveyard, add it to your hand. So you can just simply add pack Shadal fusion, then fuse from your deck if your opponent has a special summon monster. So it's kind of good for that. In addition, Super Poly for the fusion event is limited to 1. It's unlimited in the other extra deck strategies, because you obviously aren't playing fusion there. But this does kind of suck, because this is your primary board breaker for Tearlaments. Again, you don't really play too many hand traps, so you rely on things like Super Poly in order to break boards. You probably want 3 Droplet as well. I only put 2 in here. But aside from that, Tearlaments is looking okay. Whoops, took out the Earth Golem by accident there. Yeah, don't search Earth. Everything will come up in the game, so put back in that Earth Golem. But yeah, for the deck list, Triple King of the Swamp. The reason why I like this, guys, is because, first of all, it's very unlikely that this baits an Ash Blossom, but sometimes it does, which is nice. But just getting this into the graveyard and then getting a free poly to your hand is actually nice, because if you normal summon Rhino or Supreme Seamar, and then you send a Havnus or a Sharon, you don't have to use the on-field Seamare or the Rhino Heart. You can actually just use the King of the Swamp that you just put into the graveyard. So it keeps the body on field, and you get a free card in your graveyard that you can use with the fusion in order to make anything, I guess, right? Because normally you still make it Kalos regardless, but you could make like the negate Grapha, for example, and then continue to play from there. You could make a Rukalos right off the bat, right? And then follow up with Kit Kalos on the second fusion. So like the reason why you'd want to go for Rukalos first is if you need to play more than 5 summons before you can get like your full end board up, Rukalos can be that negate for the Nibiru if the opponent has it, and then you can still go into Kit Kalos on the second fusion. Double Ghost Ogre, again, I just explained why, but continuing to play this for the 1 Sangan summoning, but it's also good into a number of other things, destroying monsters, destroying important spells and stuff that your opponent might have. 1 Havnus, of course, 1 Squamata, 1 Dragon. I don't know if you necessarily need to play the Dragon. I just like having the utility of potentially popping spell or traps on the field. 1 Snow, you could opt to play 2 as well. Triple Seamare and double Sharon. The unfortunate thing about Tearlaments in this event is they have limited Rhino Heart to 1. It's normally unlimited. So if we take a look at the Tearlament strategy here, all of the same regular ladder restrictions apply, except for the fact that Rhino Heart is at 1, which is really unfortunate. I mean, you can still play 3 Seamare, but I mean, you know, they just hit us with the banned Pearl Rhino, which really sucked. I mean, I really wanted, like, I'm pretty much having to navigate away from this deck now because of that. And it does make it significantly harder, right? Like, playing Trivial Karma now just feels underwhelming. Like, you technically just sub out Pearl Rhino for another Grief. But, like, I actually was playing against Tempai, and I searched Grief off of Trivial Karma, and then I played the Grief, and the opponent actually hit me with a Ghost Spell. And I was like, are you serious? And of course, if that was Pearl Rhino, I mean, I would have got Ghost Spelled on something else anyways, but like, at least I would have had Field Spell up, right? Which is a pop for the fusion. But it's unfortunate that the Field Spell is now gone. I want them to bring it back, but I don't know. I mean, come on, man. You guys nerfed Tearlaments already enough. Like, leave it alone. Anyways, continuing on here. You still got your 1 Kaldo and your 1 Mudora, which, again, could be significant if they don't end up putting up the Transcendent Dragion, or, you know, it gets to the graveyard. You can shuffle it back before they can bring it back. Of course, if the Transcendent Dragon is on the field, you can't activate any effects, but these cards are good for potential disruption into that as well. Shadal Beast and 1 Tearlaments Kashtira, 1 Hell Shadal Hollow. This card acts as additional mills as well. 1 Poly, which comes up actually quite a bit if you know how to use this properly. Like, you could have a Shadal in hand and just like any other dark monster, like even a Tearlament card on the field or something, and then you just poly into the window, right? And then you get your 1 special summon after that off of the Tearlament card that went to the graveyard. Bring out, I don't know, like Rukalos if you have a King of the Swamp in the grave, or Kit Kalos, search for Sulik, right? You have a monster negate set up, and you know your opponent's limited to 1 special summon. Like, it's actually pretty good. So that's why I'm playing just a couple of extra Shadal cards that we can use here, because yeah, 1 Shadal monster, so you can even use the Hell Shadal. I believe. I don't think I've actually done that, but yeah, that is an option. 1 Foolish Burial, 1 Rhoda for the 1 of Rhino Heart, which you may not want to play this. Like, if you open this card with the Rhino Heart, like, that's really bad. So you might not even want to play this Rhoda. But 1 Shadal Fusion, 1 Foolish Burial. Like, Shadal Fusion is also just polymerization, but if you're going second, this could be branded fusion for Tearlaments. I mean, for Shadals basically. So you may or may not want to run this. I do think that the El Shadal Fusion is probably the better one, just because it doesn't have the condition that your opponent needs an extra deck monster. 1 Foolish Burial Goods, 1 Talents, double Grief, triple Scream, 1 Super Poly. Again, just nerf the strategy a little bit, quite a bit. So again, I'm not sure how it's gonna work, but yeah, I mean, if you go first against Tempai, you're not really needing Super Poly anyways. I mean, it is a good end board piece regardless to set up for the Fusion Summon during the next turn, but yeah, just having 1 still hurts regardless. 1 El Shadal Fusion, double Droplet. Again, you could play 3. 1 Heartbeat. I think you probably want to play this, maybe even 2, simply because being able to outspell and traps, like the backward removal, I think is pretty relevant. What's nice about this event too, I know I haven't brought it up, but like Floodgates should all be banned. So like no Skill Drain, no Goes In, no Rivalry, like none of that stuff you have to worry about. I spelled Rivalry wrong, but that's fine. Is Macrocosmos limited? No, Macrocosmos is banned, and then that means Fissure should also be banned as well. Yeah, the Fissures are banned. So, you know, Tearlaments doesn't have to worry about this nonsense, and I think a lot of the Kashtira cards are also, yeah, like no Arise Heart, so like no Fenrir. So like any Xyz based or non-archetype or not archetype, non-extra deck strategy focused decks are banned. So like you can't play Floanderies, for example. You can't play Labyrinth like you could for the Xyz Cup because it doesn't really use an extra deck. Like everything is banned. You can't play Snake Eyes even. So yeah, all of these things are just like straight up not available in the game to be played, which is interesting for this event. They've definitely learned from Xyz Cup, which I made a video on the last time, and I'm like, yeah, they're definitely not going to make this mistake again, because Labyrinth was one of the most popular, if not the most popular deck for the Xyz Cup, which is kind of sad to say, like, all the Xyz strategies out there, and like people would rather play Labyrinth because it's just better than any current Xyz strategy, even better than Kashtira, because how much they nerf Kashtira. That is until Rizeville comes out. Anyways, I don't know where we left off, but yeah, for the traps, it's standard, Tearlaments, Meta Noise, Crime, and Sulik. You could opt not to play the Trippy Karma at this point if you want, because again, you just lose another ability to discard it if you do have it in your hand, with the Super Poly being at 1, but you'd want to send it off Droplet if you do have it. And this card ends up in your hand more often than I think you want it to be for some reason, but it's really weird. I don't know. Anyways, for the extra deck, you got Millenniumize Restrict. This is a card that can be made with a Tearlament card and the King of the Swamp, acting as the Relinquish name. And then this basically just acts as a free anti-negate. So once per turn, when your opponent activates a monster effect, so if they try to Ash something and you have this on field, you quick effect, target that effect monster that they control or in their graveyard, so the Ash would be in their graveyard. You equip that Ash Blossom to this card, and then, you know, this card becomes whatever the attack and defense is. But the main thing is the monsters with that equipped monster's original name cannot attack. Also, their effects on field and activated effects are negated. So I'm pretty sure this is how it's worked. I never actually played this myself. Obviously, I don't have it crafted, but I've seen a replay where somebody ashed the opponent and they used this to take the Ash, and then went on the chain when it was resolving, the Ash effect was negated. So they were able to play through Ash with this card. So this works against like Ghost Ogre. It works against any hand trap that goes to the graveyard. You can this acts as like insulation against hand traps. So I think that's why you'd want to play it. One Mood Dragon or Mud Dragon, however you want to say it. Double Winda. You can opt to play one, but you got extra deck space to spare at this point since there's no Baron or Lynx for this fusion strategy. One Kit Kalos, one Garua, one Earth Golem Adignister. This helps against the link-based strategies if you do end up seeing the one of Super Poly. The one El Shaddai Construct, one Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. So again, just another Super Poly target, but also something you can use with Polymerization. One Predaplant, Dragostapelia, one Rukalos, one Guardian Chimera, which is the primary thing you're going to be using with Polymerization. This card is still very, very strong, especially going second, or mainly going second, right? Or third. Not third, geez. On turn 3 is what I mean. Of course, one Kaleido Heart, which, this is why like the one Rhino Heart sucks, but again, you have triple King of the Swamp, so this can act as the Rhino Heart name for Kaleido. One Dragonite Draco, one Dragon plus one Warrior probably will never come up because Tenpai doesn't put warrior monsters on field. It would be nice if they did, but again, the odds that you'd see it with the Super Poly, probably irrelevant. And then one card you'd actually do make quite a bit with the Tearlament fusions would be the Grapha with the King of the Swamp as well. This card is like kind of like an Omni-Negate. It only works for normal spell and trap cards or monster effects, but it is very nice. And another way you can discard stuff like Trippy Karma out of your hand. But because this discards for the effect, it will trigger like a tier name if it's in your hand, or a Shaddai card if you discard it. So that's kind of nice as well. So yeah, that is the first deck, Tearlaments. Wish it was more at full power. But one of the decks that I actually have built on an alt account and I think is super fun to play is the Chimera deck. And this deck is at full power as well. Oh, sorry, one other thing I'll mention. You'll notice that I don't play the Thrust package into the Threatening Roar with this build. Because again, if you end up milling the Threatening Roar or you mill your Thrust, like it's just dead mills, right? Which, you have enough dead mills already now because they've disabled the deck so much. So you just want to try to have good mills, and that's why you put the Shaddai cards in here. But you don't necessarily need the Thrust package in this because your goal is to end on the Winda. If you're forced to go first, you're like, okay, and likely my opponent's on Tenpai, I'm gonna go for the El Shaddai Winda instead. But yeah, Chimera is a strategy that I think is also going to be very strong here because the Thrust, which we play 3 of in this build, can actually thrust you into board breakers. Do I think this could get you into Engine? I guess it can get you into like a Fright for Patchwork as well if your opponent controls a card. But yeah, mainly just into board breakers like the Talents or the Evenly Matched or Set Imperm. And then, of course, you can get to the Threatening Roar with the Thrust as well with Chimera. But Chimera is, again, one of those strategies where you can afford to play a lot of non-engine to a certain extent. So double Ghost Ogre, triple Ash Blossom, and then triple Imperm. So kind of just I guess the standard at this point. You could opt to include Veilers as well. But what's interesting about this deck, which is really, I think, a hidden counter to Tenpai to a certain extent, is the fact that you play illusion monsters. And illusion monsters all have the effect that says this monster can't be destroyed by battle if this card battles a monster. So if you're able to bring out one of these in the battle phase, after your opponent's wiped out your board or something, before they make the Transcendent Dragion, this card just sitting in defense, like your opponent can't out it, right? They need to pop it with like the Bident coming or the Transcendent coming back or something like that, right? And there's ways that, if they don't have the Transcendent on field because they put it in the graveyard to bring it back to pop a card, you can get these cards out during the battle phase by using like the Chimera engrave effect that says during your opponent's turn, quick effect, banish this card from your graveyard, target one Beast Fiend or Illusion Monster in your graveyard, special summon it. Same thing for the Baphomet here, which works for the same thing but for banished. So if one of these get banished, you can just bring it back with banishing the Baphomet, or if they're in the graveyard, just banish the Chimera during the battle phase if you can activate effects because the Transcendent Dragon isn't on field. Put out the Illusion Monster, now your opponent can't OTK you. So there's a lot of insulation against Tenpai with a deck like Chimera potentially, and it's just an overall strong strategy. When you go first with this deck, it's a really, really strong setup, I think, because you're able to hand loop for one with the Chimera, King of Phantom Beasts. You're able to set up a couple of interruptions with the Cornfield Kotal and or Mirror Sword Knight in the graveyard. So while you have a Chimera, Flying Mythical Beast, banish this card from your field to the graveyard, negate a monster effect. Which is nice. And then this one, the negate is when your opponent activates a card or effect that targets a card you control while you control the Chimera, the Flying Mythical Beast, you can banish this card and negate that effect and destroy the card as well. So a couple of decent interruptions in the grave while you control a Chimera, which this card becomes Chimera. And then funnily enough, like I remember I got cooked. I would not have got cooked by this deck one time, I think during I don't know if it was an event or a ladder match, right? But I cleared off my opponent's field, but they played this, which you don't normally see. And they were able to get, like, I think I impermed this Chimera, so its name goes back to Chimera, the King of Phantom Beasts, and doesn't stay as Chimera, the Flying Mythical Beast. And I did that because I know how this deck plays because I have it on an alt account. And I'm like, I turn off these interruptions, right? They can't use this now because you don't have a card called Chimera, the Flying Mythical Beast, because that's what this card, that part of the effect, this card's effect is it changes its name. But they played the Fusion Armament and just brought out this, which is the actual name of the card. And I'm like, well, now I can't play through the two disruptions in the graveyard because they have this friggin' thing on the field. So it's really weird. But yeah, this card being a normal spell can also be thrusted for. So if you're worried about this getting negated or something at some point, or they impermit and you need it to stay live, like you can just somehow get this out on field with the Fusion Armament, and it's an interruption. You got one Super Poly in the Fusion strategy as well. 2 Call by the Graves, 1 Cross out, of course. 1 Droplet, you could opt to play more, but triple Chimera Fusion is, kind of the heart and soul of the deck here. 1 Threatening Roar again as the installation, additional installation from Tenpai, in addition to your illusion monsters that you can search for with the thrust. 1 Evenly as a board breaker for going second, along with the talents there. Triple Imperm, and then like talents, double Fright for Patchwork with, this should be 2 polys to search off Patchwork. So again, just a slight misstep there. And then, you can play 42. I think that's fine. Double Big Wing, triple Mirror Sword Knight, double Cornfield, or triple Cornfield Kotal, triple Gazelle, double Edgem Chain. You might not need to play this Emissary, but this card kind of locks up your opponent's follow-up turns if you do end up getting this on field, because it says at the end of your opponent's battle phase. So if this is in your graveyard and you're able to bring it back onto the field during the battle phase of your opponent's turn by that Chimera, this says at the end of your opponent's battle phase, if this this card survives, because obviously they can't out it unless they pop it during the battle phase, but it can't be destroyed by battle. But at the end of their battle phase, you can activate this effect until the start of your opponent's next battle phase. So all throughout your turn and then back on their turn until they enter their battle phase. All attack position monsters your opponent currently controls cannot change battle positions or be used as material for Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, or Link Summons, and their effects are negated. So whatever they have on field, it's just like their follow-up turn, they can't do anything with those cards. So this is kind of like a floodgate, which is really nice because when you look at Chimera and what it normally did on ladder is it would play cards like the Abyss Statue, which was a floodgate, and a pretty powerful floodgate, right? Because if you were able to play this in this event, you just put this on field turn 1, your opponent can't, they need to out this statue now in order to be able to play, right, with Tenpai. But the other thing that this deck would play is King Tiger Wang Hu, a very old card from back in my day, PGD, Pharaoh Guardian. But you could banish and banish either one of the fusions and bring this card back. So both of these are banned as floodgates. So you can still get this out though, which is a little bit harder to do, but it's definitely still viable. And this card can help lock up the game for you in the following turns. So it's kind of nice for that. The extra deck, 1 Chimera if you're playing the Fusion Armament, 1 Garua for the 1 of Super Poly. You could also obviously want to put Mud Dragon in here as well. So again, just another quick oversight there on my end. And you can obviously cut this to 2 probably. Or you can cut like the Earth Golem or something like that. Like it's probably never going to come up where you have Super Poly directly for this in that scenario. But yeah, 2 or 3 Chimera, King of Phantom Beast, 2 of the Baphomet, the mythical King of Phantom Beasts. You can opt to play the Earth Golem for the Super Poly target, same with the Starving Venom. This card can also be used, no, not really, right? Because these are not darks. Yeah, none of these are darks. The Baphomet is the only dark. Okay. Well, I guess you could summon our Ejim Chain, and if you have a big wing on the field, like you can use the Poly and then bring out the Starving Venom. But 1 Dragostapelia, 1 to 2 Chimera, the Illusion Beast. This helps you OTK if your opponent has a board. And then 2 to 3 Guardian Chimera. Again, just super strong with Chimera Fusion and or Polymerization as well. So Chimera is a very interesting deck. I think one of the more fun and better decks for the Fusion event for sure. And then I know there's more viable Fusion strategies, but I'm just thinking of like what's the top tier Fusion decks. I don't know if Branded will be any good. I haven't played Branded in a very long time, as you can tell. Like I have a lot of the Branded cards, but I never got any of the updated ones because it's just never a strategy that I pursued. But regardless, this is a strategy that's still available. The Alabaz and the Alibur are limited to 1. You have a lot of, not a lot, but you have a couple of key cards banned in this strategy, I believe. Like the Retribution is banned. Let me take a look here. Yeah, like Retribution is banned. Obviously, Expulsion is still banned. But aside from that, I don't think there's any other major hits. Like losing, like opening to 1, Alibur to 1, Albaz to 1. Like the Albaz to 1 is, I think, the thing that hurts the most. But aside from that, the deck is still able to probably do decently well. I don't know, updated Branded players, if you're watching this, let me know what you think. But yeah, like you have the Despia cards that you could use. You still have the rest of the Branded strategy. So this one I opted for 1 Veiler, 1 Despian Tragedy, triple Ash Blossom, 1 Albaz, 1 Alubur, 1 Tri-Brigade Mercurier, 1 Springen's Kit, 2 Blazing Cartasia, sorry, and 2 Guiding Quem, 1 Soronier, double Albion the Shrouded Dragon, 1 Bestial Lubellion, 1 Duster, which you can thrust into because this is the deck that obviously plays Thrust, since Thrust can get you into the Branded Fusion, which is your engine. Double Gold Sark as well, now that it's been updated to 2. Triple Fusion Deployment. Again, getting the Cartesia. Wait, can you get Cartesia off Fusion Deployment? Yeah, you can off of this. Okay. It's been a while since I played Branded, as you can tell. Or getting an Albaz. But yeah, 1 Talons, again, another target for Thrust. 1 Branded Lost. 1 Regained, double Call by the Grave, double Forbidden Droplet, 1 Opening, triple Branded in High Spirits, 1 Branded in Red, 1 Evenly Matched, which again is searchable off of the Thrust. 1 Imperm, again, settable, searchable off Thrust. 1 Branded Banishment, 1 Brightest Blazing Branded King, which is decent, right? Going first into Tenpai, let's say, because you can, if they play Field Spell, you just activate this right away, then the Field Spell is now negated. So that's pretty good. 1 Fusion Duplication, and 1 Branded Beast. For the extra deck, 1 Predaplant Dragostapelia, 1 Borlord Furious, 1 Titanclaw the Ash Dragon, 1 Sprind the Iron Dash Dragon. Oh, sorry, Albion is also limited to 1 in this event, which is unfortunate. So in addition to your main deck hits, this is also limited to 1, which means you have to rely on recycling this with Lubellion. But this being Quiritis, 2 Mirror Jade, 1 Lubellion. You could also opt to play 2 of this probably because you want additional ways to recycle the Albion where possible. But you got 2 Granugol, the Dust Dragon, 1 Rinbrum, 1 Sanctifier, and 1 Guardian Chimera that you can use off of the Branded in Red. So again, not a huge fan of Branded anymore, but it is an available option. And to round out this video, if you've made it this far, let's go ahead and take a look at the Synchro decks.